experiment, just go wild. Hi, my name is Rachele Manett. I use she and they pronouns, and I am the education coordinator for Venus Envy Halifax, an education-based sex shop and bookstore located in Halifax, Nova Scotia. My disability identity relates to my body and how I move through the world because of a chronic health condition, whereas my other identities require a little more explanation. I choose queer and genderqueer to describe myself because both my gender and sexuality feel fluid and ever-changing. My sexuality isn't necessarily defined by any one explanation, and neither is my gender. And I choose to use multiple pronouns because it feels like they help to capture multiple parts of me at once. I am a sexuality educator. And at a basic level, this means I teach people about sex. At a deeper level, I like to think that I'm helping people explore their own bodies and their own desires. And I do this by offering basic information that's often left out of mainstream sexuality education, but also offering personal reflections and thoughts and allowing time for people to ask about what they need to know. I like to think of this education as a collaborative process. It's been a while since I've been the recipient of a school-based sexuality education program, but from what I remember, it wasn't good. Currently, I do some work with teens and youth, but most of the education that I offer is directed at adults. However, I generally get similar kinds of feedback. Current and past school-based sexuality education is often lacking information on bodies, sexualities, and genders that are not straight, cisgender, and able-bodied, which means that queer, trans, and disabled students are not seeing themselves represented in education that is supposed to be about them. I also hear that the people teaching about these topics are often underprepared to discuss anything outside of the predetermined curriculum, and sometimes they aren't even prepared to discuss the curriculum itself. Another major thing that I hear is missing from these programs is any attention or focus on pleasure as a part of sex. For me and for many other people, pleasure is the main reason to have sex, so ignoring this is just disingenuous and unfair. I think the first thing that I would change when it comes to sexuality education in schools is to hire actual, sex educators to do this work. It's also important that these educators be from diverse communities so that the students from these same communities can see themselves represented in, not just in the topics, but among the people that are teaching them too. It isn't something we should be doing to avoid getting in trouble. It's something we should do because it literally makes sex better and worth having. We've turned consent practice into something we only do because we hear about the repercussions of not getting consent. But I think it would be easier to wrap our heads around consent if we thought about it in the way that it was intended, as an obvious and important part of sexual practice. And in the end, someone saying no to us, no to kissing us, no to having sex with us, says nothing about our worth as a person, and there are probably a million other people out there that we can kiss who actually want to kiss us. What I mean by all this is, rather than looking at consent as a way to avoid punishment, we should be looking at it as a way to validate what we want and that's what someone else wants. Hearing somebody that you're into tell you that they're into you is such a wonderful feeling. So let's chase that feeling instead of avoiding a different feeling. The first toy that I got to choose for myself was an app-enabled G-spot vibrator called the WeVibe Rave, which we sell at Venus Envy if anyone is looking for something like this that works long distance. And I bought this toy about 5 years ago when me and my current partner were in a long distance relationship, and we wanted to get a cool toy that would make it easier for us to have some kind of long distance sex. My sex toy interests have really changed over the years, and something that worked really well for me then just doesn't work for me now. Or I found something that works better. Now I have a whole collection of toys, and I'm so lucky that I get to try different toys and experience different sensations kind of whenever I want. But what I've really learned from this is that all bodies are so different, and a toy that works for one person just may not work for another. I think the biggest thing that I've learned from all of this is that our society really doesn't see disabled people as sexual beings at all. However, both from a personal and professional experience, I know that this isn't true. Disabled people are people. Some of us love sex and some of us don't, and some of us fall somewhere in the middle of that. But for those of us that do want to have sex, we have to jump through a lot of hoops to access information about sex, or anything at all. Things like misinformation, barriers to toys and information, navigating potential partners, knowledge on disability, and the worst is unsupportive healthcare professionals who expect us to just focus on more important things. Ultimately, sex and pleasure are human rights, and people with disabilities deserve access to information and access to sex if we want it, and many of us do. There are two questions that I am tired of being asked, and they really go hand in hand. The first question is, how do disabled people have sex? And the second question is, what is the best sex toy? The reason these questions tire me out is because I really can't answer them, and neither can anyone else. Sex and sex toys are so different for each person. I'm a disabled person, and I can tell you how I have sex, but I can't tell you how another disabled person has sex. I can tell you what toys I love, but I can't tell you what toys you'll love. When I'm asked these questions, I always respond the same way. I encourage people to explore their bodies and explore their interests, and I tell people that what works for one person might not work for another. These questions come from a societal assumption that sex looks one certain way, but that just isn't true. Sex means something different for different people, and that's part of the beauty of it. My biggest hopes and dreams for me and my community is that we just get rid of our standard definition of sex that is just inherently straight and cisgender and able-bodied. Once we accept that sex can mean different things for different people, we'll open the doors for everyone to feel less self-conscious and more excited about exploring our bodies to better figure out what works for us. And we'll stop trying to fit into one box that clearly doesn't work. I think this would also encourage us to ask more questions of our partners and to try to figure out what they like and what they want, and really open the doors for better consent practice and communication in general. If we don't just assume that we know what sex is, it means we'll feel better about asking what kind of sex people want. So a final message that I hope that all of you can take away from me and from this talk is that you deserve pleasure. You have every right to explore and to find ways to make your pleasure happen. Touch yourself and explore your body. Ask partners what their wildest sex dreams are and decide if you feel comfortable making them come true. Find sexy inspiration somewhere and experiment. Just go wild. Your body belongs to you, and you have every right to make it feel good.